I have to really applaud all of you. Dr. Castro, I enjoyed the presentation, particularly telling us how many professors and different professors in this university already doing intersectional work. Now we have a Department of Women's Ethnicity and Intersectional Studies, and that department has a job to do because there are people to do the job. Dr. McCleary Jones brought in a bunch of statistics. Statistics, they don't lie. Science, research. One thing that is very interesting in what she has presented is not just those facts that we know, but the thing is, you could have the policies, you could have the rules, but the implementation is very important because of the customs that those scientists have already imbibed. They have customs that create biases, and they may not even know that they have the biases. And this brings us to the International Women's Day theme. The International Women's Day theme is break the bias. Break the bias. And so we move on to Dr. Rivera. The focus is education. And educators, we have listened to you, particularly the control of education, the matrix of power, from imperialism to colonialism to globalization. It's an X-ray of power from various angles. Control of education from various angles, the knowledge production and maintenance of that knowledge, and teaching people to speak to that knowledge in a particular way that continues to maintain those who manufacture that knowledge and use all kinds of mechanisms to enforce that language. So thank you very much. And I now invite people to ask their questions and make their comments.
This is Wanda Hodge. For Dr. Is it Valencia? Well, why is it that when I do studies on African American and other ethical groups, that that African Americans are the ones who always they always pay close attention to, or they always try to sidebar, or like that kid, like you said, they was looking at the kid and they were paying close attention to that African American male. So the other kid, they could have been out drifting off doing whatever they want to do, but because their main focus was on this African American kid. It still is in society, but now they just out in the open doing it. I mean, it's always been there, but now what can we do to get over that hump? I mean, what do we need to do to get over that hump?
Well, I think just being aware of what we may contribute, see something, say something. So where you find yourself in a seat of power, then use that platform. I think an overnight change is not going to be. So as Dr. Rivera was just saying, we have a train that's been moving for quite some time. So it's chipping away. And that's about it. It's almost like the horse in water, right? Yeah, I can bring you over here, but if you don't want to partake. And I was thinking back to one time I went to actually a diversity training, and there was a white male in there, and he was just very obstinate. He was angry with the presenters, just his whole demeanor. And I came away thinking, somebody probably told him he needed to come to this diversity training and he didn't want to be there. So I think there are going to be some cases like that it will have to be enforcement of the policy, the rule, the you can't do it with candy, so then you need the stick. And so in so many ways, that's how change happens. It could be passive resistance, and then, utilizing the power that you have. But I think wherever we find ourselves, we have to exercise that, and alliances, somehow make alliances so you're not fighting the fight on your own. You find some like-minded, empathetic individuals to come along with you. So there's not a quick, easy answer other than we chip away, stay alert and chip away. And thank you for your question. I do want to ask Dr. Rivera, he talked about that, how we can become just like our oppressor. And I remember the Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire, and he spoke to that. Can you speak a little bit more on that dynamic?
Yeah, just another interesting writer happened to be that Jewish, his name is Albert Mimen, who actually talk about that the best thing that somebody who's being oppressed can do is become an oppressor, which is the internalized piece that I'm talking about, okay? Paulo Freire actually was saying that the idea of trying to, clarify, the dynamic between the teacher and the student, and is where the learning take place. That dynamic piece in which they both interacting, which is circular. And the idea again is to try to bring the student to ask questions, not taking authority as if was all it was. Okay, so that creates the whole idea of the critical thinking, creating consciousness. The multicultural movement in counseling and psychotherapy is interesting because that's what they've been trying to do in the last 20 years. But like you just said, you can take the horse to the water, you cannot make it drink. It's a forward and backward piece. It's almost like the idea that every time we gain a couple of steps, people become afraid of, what we can do. They forget that we've been here since the beginning of time in this country, okay? We're part of this country. We ain't going anywhere, okay? So therefore, might as well get to us a seat at the table, so we can start to talk about, critical thinking, about what we can learn from each other and what we can do as a unified force versus a divided force.
I have a question for Dr. Castro. All these professors that do intersectional work. And my question is not really for Dr. Castro. Anybody can chip into that. What can we do with these professors? What can we do for intersectionality? What can we do for WSU and for the nation and for the world with all these talents about that critical implement we need to fight a kind of something going underground, the biases and whatever names we call all these. Okay. And some just say that they do research on it, they don't teach it.
I think there are a lot of different things we can do, and we're doing some of them. We can do more. So one of the things we've done is we've had these perspective series in LAS, which give our faculty an opportunity to talk about their own research. Most of it has to do with something related to intersectional studies. Having more forums like that where our own faculty share their work with the community would be great. I also think it would be fabulous if the WISE program could provide a locus for all of the affiliates to share work with each other and to collaborate. And I'm not sure what form that would take, whether it's meetings once in a while or, another venue in which people have talks, or, there are a lot of different ways that could happen. But that would be a really good start on getting people who just study, this narrow thing to think about what everyone else is doing and how that can help them better understand their own work and give them new directions in research. And one of the things that we're doing in philosophy is we're trying to talk to each other about how we teach different sections of various courses, and to try to collaborate about our, the core outcomes, the materials we use, the strategies we use, and one of the things I would really like to see us do more of is work on sharing how we teach diversity content. So when people have good materials, good strategies, things that really work, sharing those with each other. This does run the risk of having too many courses have the same stuff in them. So students are seeing the same thing rather than a new thing. But I think there are lots of opportunities, and I'll leave the floor to other people to chime in.
I do know that it's not a tool in the university who actually kind of look at all those diversity courses and look that it's not overlapping, you know. So because I think that that's a waste of time, you know. I mean, for me, it's the idea, like, for example, one of the things that I was brought here to talk about Latinx, you know, and I know that there's some courses, you know, but for whatever reason, doesn't seem to go across the board, you know. It seems like, you know, it's concentrated, and yet we don't have a Latinx minor. That's it, you know. And so it's kind of like, okay, so, but anyhow, it's a hands off, so I just can't shut up. But that was a good question.
I wanted to address Dr. Castro's idea is that we've actually been talking about reinvigorating the Center for Women's Studies for exactly that purpose of having it be a collaborative environment that focuses on research. While the affiliation would be about teaching, the affiliation with the center and the engagement with the center would be about resources and about research and about engaging across the college and really across the university. I think a lot of times we think about intersectionality almost entirely in LAS, but I think as Dr. McCleary has very clearly shown, this is not something that is college-based. This is something that's university and really universal. And so I think that we would like to see the center develop a robust relationship that takes time, and frankly, it also takes money. But the ability to have that be a hub of the university, places WISE also at the center of the university, places LAS at the center of the university, and places the conversations on intersectionality that we've been so, I've enjoyed so much today. And I think we've had such a wonderful treat of listening to the ways in which intersectionality is being presented at the university, but also being felt at the university by young students who are making their way into the world.
I don't mean to pull us off topic, but I was interested, Dr. McCleary, in the presentation. I think it was in the form of a circle, the various sort of determinants of health, and we focused a lot on implicit bias. But I was really curious. I'm very interested in things like house paint and lead and things like that. And I'm wondering, do we at WSU, do we know, are we working on that in terms of the city of Wichita? Do we know if there are neighborhoods where that is an issue? You brought up obviously in Flint, Michigan, the water situation, but I was really interested sort of in that more locally and kind of what, if any, WSU's relationship is to those issues.
I cannot speak to any research or collaborations going on related to health and environmental science. From a health perspective, my background is as a registered nurse, so that explains maybe some of my maybe reference places, but we would look to our State Department of Health to give us any information related to the quality checks and things like that that are in our environment. So that's where we would look to, and if they're testing and doing those type of measurements, they would alert the populace if there was an issue. So, but as far as what on our university campus, who's doing that type of work, I'm unaware. I'm totally in the healthcare provider sector.
Even if you have implicit bias training, if people can't access clean water, if they have lead in the paint of their homes, if they can't access nutritious food, those seem to me very maybe those are more difficult things to change. I don't know.
I want to separate those for the point of discussion. Those social determinants of health look at not only economics, education, but the environment. And the implicit bias is kind of a separate thing that can, interface, but try to maybe separate those two from a conscious stream to the what's happening unconsciously that impacts our decisions. So interface might be, well, why did you dump the toxic waste over here? Okay. So how did that happen? Why is your response quicker on this side of town than that side of town? So those are some ways that you can find some interweaving there of those particular concepts. I think that may be where you're going with your thought there.
No, I'm also just thinking kind of about materially, sort of where the ways in which sometimes race can be a proxy for poverty around health issues. The fact that so many Americans also don't even have a primary care physician. Sort of wondering to what extent we at WSU, like through research, through grant activity or whatever, take up those kinds of issues.
Well, you'd have to look to who would be funding that type of research. So sometimes things are hot topics and there's money flying for research in a particular area, and
right.
then maybe not. So
That's
you
true.
know, so yeah, that may factor into what is researchable and what is fundable.
That's true.
Interesting, because there's also a direct correlation between climate change and behavior in terms of drinking, in terms of violence, and it's being documented very well by the American Psychological Association, and yet, we still haven't done much about, in which we can see that it's a high correlation also in terms of race and ethnicity, and where every time we have one of those phenomenon, like you remember the hurricanes and all the flooding, usually the most affected people are people of color, but we ain't touching it, which I found that so interesting.
Many of us here were at the morning session by the students. We had over 50 attending that morning session, the students showcase. And the students actually, they have a lot to say. And some of us were not there. So I just want to remind us of some of the things that they said, because the focus of this conversation is intersectionality at Wichita State University. So the students did a lot of research. I mean, even they made simulations and they did interviews of students and brought us back students' views about intersectionality. The students acknowledge that Wichita State University is doing a lot in terms of intersectionality, and they had a list, and they also revealed the gaps, the areas that needed to be worked on, and the areas of their concern. They mentioned faculty. They said that they need to see more faculty representing intersectionality in the way they just see faculty visually, and in terms of their pronouns, things. These are important to young people, and so we teach them. We want to make them comfortable too. That's part of intersectional. They mentioned training of the people who interact with them, and then all of them said courses on intersectionality. And majority of the presentations were actually about well-being, about poverty. And I think all of them had something to do with poverty. Many of them are from my classes. I teach inequality for first year seminar, my first year seminar course, but they all diverted everything to poverty, which was okay. And it worked, because it enabled them to say what they had to say. I must have missed some things, and please, those who were there in the morning session, can you just fill in some of the things that I have missed?
Well, they were talking about first year seminar course is going to be looking at local water testing, and the common read this year is the Flint water crisis. I think Dr. Castro put that in there.
Yeah, if I could just say one thing about that one. What they actually did in the course, sorry, I can't remember which course or who was teaching it, but they actually got test kits and they were sent home to test their own water and then get the results, which I think is fabulous.
Then another talked about the university village being able to address the food desert problem here, looking at environmental injustice that deals with basic resources. This is Virginia. She's a social worker student, and she appreciates the information about intersectionality and being more aware of biases, and wants to represent herself and the profession in the university in a most culturally aware and diverse manner, and opportunities allow, like this summit, allow her to do so. And she's thankful to everyone that's here. Well, that's very nice. Thank you, Virginia, from all of us, I guess.
Thank you.
Tahisha Ortiz is saying that the professors are really doing great with implementing intersectionality in their own studies, but it's not 100% translating down to students on campus, regardless of their major. They feel like maybe they're left out of the conversation, and then, just a basic knowledge of what intersectionality, how it affects them. And a few felt very knowledgeable on the topic, but some variability there.
If I could say something about that, as Robin indicated, a lot of the intersectionality studies are really coming from LAS, from the humanities, and the courses reflect that. So the students who are taking those courses majoring in LAS are going to get a lot more exposure. They're going to have faculty who are thinking about it, more so than in, say, the business school from faculty who aren't thinking about it, or an engineering school from faculty who aren't thinking about it. And so there is a disciplinary bias here, and we're not getting this through across campus evenly. It's very uneven, as Tahisha says.
We have raised over and over again on this campus having a diversity graduation requirement. And there's ways to even do it so that you don't have to increase the graduation requirements. But trying to bring this kind of stuff into the curriculum in that kind of cross-college way is quite difficult in my experience now, because we've just gone through this kind of, the trend has been cut back on graduation requirements so that colleges can, do other things. So I don't know the answer to it. I just know that most universities have something that is formally recognized as a graduation requirement. There are different courses that can fulfill it. And I just think for all the talk at WSU, it's just very strange that this can never actually happen. It's always too controversial, or the other colleges aren't going to like it because it means they have to take an LAS class, although they could participate in the, I'm flummoxed by it, to be very honest. I just don't get it at some level. So I'd be curious to see if other people have ideas about that, and ideas about why it's so that we don't have it.
Well, I think one of the things that exists currently is, when you register a class or you create a class or change the number through the KIM system, you have to mark whether there's diversity content, and then like a whole other kind of menu opens up. Students wouldn't necessarily even have to take a separate course. One of, probably more than one of their general education classes, anything taken in the humanities would probably address, or could very easily address, a diversity content and quotient for that type of learning. I think just engaging in intersectional conversation, maybe that focuses more heavily on race and ethnicity, or one that focuses more heavily on gender or sexuality, give students the opportunity to think about those questions and then take those questions and apply them in other ways and in other fields. So I agree. I think it's been very hard. The conversation, this is my 16th year here, and the conversation has been raised at least 4 times since I've been here. And it always comes back to this issue of, well, we can't make we've already foisted too much of the humanities on other colleges. And so we can't ask them to do any more. And I don't even really know if it is asking them to do more, just asking to do at least 3 hours more thoughtfully, more specifically chosen, and not necessarily adding an additional class.
There are other universities that have what we're doing too, and they still have a requirement. And I don't know why other colleges couldn't participate in designing courses that would fulfill that requirement. I don't know why LAS would have to completely own it anyway. One might want other colleges, to come up with classes that might be appropriate for their students, or even for our students who might want to take a class like Dr. McCleary-Jones, based on the stuff that you were talking about. So it just strikes me as people, I don't know, it strikes me as odd, because there are plenty of other places where there's diversity requirement in classes, and they still also have a diversity requirement.
For some of our accredited programs in health sciences, we do have to have that diversity piece. Our accrediting bodies are looking for that. So within, as Robin was saying, when it comes to the KIM system, you'll see that area saying there is some diversity content in there. And I think for the health professions and the accredited programs, once you get to those upper level divisions, it's pretty much lockstep, and we have to give them everything that accreditation body asks for to prepare them for their licensure exam. So at that point, upper division, we're kind of locked in, and if we're at 120 credits, regents don't want you to go over 120 credits. So upper division, if it's a lockstep accredited program, there's just no wiggle room there. But now at the graduate level, where there may be some electives open, or even in public health sciences, they would have a little more flexibility than nursing or your communication speech. And so when you first made that comment, Deborah, I was thinking general studies would be a course of courses where it would live, but we do have it interwoven in some of our courses, but it's just not a freestanding course.
I'm told that the Board of Regents is planning to take another look at general education across Kansas. And so there will be, if they actually complete that, there will be another opportunity for us to rethink general education. And maybe we could end up having a diversity content requirement that could either be taken through general education courses that have diversity content, or through courses in your major that for accreditation purposes or whatever other reason have diversity content. And, just to advocate this, if we had that requirement, it would give everyone who teaches general education courses an incentive to start including diversity content.
And Clay put in a chat that for applied studies, they have some accredited programs like sports management, athletic training that have that same kind of pressure.
And K-CRAT.
Yeah.
Clay always forget us, but K-CRAT also, okay?
No, all the education programs will certainly be included in that, as well the counseling programs, whether it's school counseling or clinical mental health. So didn't forget you, Adil, was just going with the ones that would be least likely to be thought of.
No, that's okay.
Aren't you required to have something like that for certification?
Yes. Yeah. It's a part of the professional education unit accreditation standards. And it's also a part of our state program approval standards too.
Okay.
So all of the education programs are going to have that required diversity component within it.
But just
and then some of the other programs that aren't necessarily education within the college as well.
My understanding of most of the programs that require an outside accreditation is that diversity is built into the content, and that has been the move over the last few decades to include that. And so in many ways, you know, the humanities and LAS, where there isn't that accrediting body, there's a ton of diversity content in classes, is maybe a little behind in terms of requiring a diversity content that I've come to know other professional schools, the graduate programs in particular, all have that, because you're going out into what we all know is a very diverse work environment, and that accreditation body, whichever is looking at you, is looking to make sure that you're able to communicate and to understand the community in which you're going to be working.
Yes, that's true. Absolutely.
There's also a group of task forces. I've been in it only for 3 years. And I know that when selling, I have our share of task forces who deal with diversity. I don't know what that will end up to be, you know. So if I tell you that I know where they're going with that, I'll be lying because I don't know. But I will tell you that it's taking a lot of a close look, and I know that the group that I was brought here to lead will be another group who's going to be reviewing whatever it is they're coming out. So probably it's a plenty of opportunity to start to add those pieces, particularly when we're talking about diversity from the intersectionality perspective, you know, because I think that some people don't understand the differences. And sometimes we talk about diversity, people immediately go only to race and ethnicity, don't include gender, don't include SES, you know, which I think that's the piece that sometimes is missing. But I will tell you that at least I'm in 2 of those groups, you know, and Bonsell as well. So,
on that note, you're bringing a very important issue that we discussed in an earlier session. During the faculty presentations, we talked a lot about the meaning of intersectionality, which is not diversity, but they intersect, and how both of them intersect and how they are useful to the society. We are having a very exciting discussion, and I'm hoping that this discussion will continue after this, particularly with Susan's list. And so many people wanting to continue with the conversation, but we're a bit running out of time. And so I'm going to call on the Dean of Fairmont College of Liberal Arts and Sciences, Dr. Andrew Hipsley, to make some remarks.
Thank you, Shaniri. Thank you. I'm Andrew Hipsley, Dean of the Fairmont College of Liberal Arts and Sciences. Well, what a wonderful summit we've had, and what a great lineup of talks we had this evening. To me, it was a real-time demonstration of intersectionality. Of course, it makes sense to have a gathering whose focus is intersectionality, where the keynote address is by 3 academics representing 3 very different areas, but areas that we have seen clearly intersect. The Fairmount College of Liberal Arts and Sciences is a natural space for discussions like this of intersectionality. And Susan provided good evidence for this, because I think inherent in intersectionality are two other inter-concepts. Number one, interfaces, and number two, interdisciplinarity. When disciplines intersect, the communication between the disciplines is through an interface. And there are very interesting problems to be solved at the interface that lies between disciplines. For example, the interface between philosophy and science, the interface between race studies and health, and the interface between education studies and power dynamics. It is then that the program of research that is laid out to solve these problems is truly interdisciplinary. Ironically, that entails the belief in the validity of discrete disciplines. Philosophy is a discipline, and so is biology, and therefore they can intersect. And there needs to be an interface, and an interdisciplinary project can be pursued. While intersectionality draws attention to intersection, therefore, it validates these discrete spaces, and it validates the expertise, sometimes narrow expertise, in these spaces. I am happy to say we now have a Department of Women's, Ethnic, and Intersectionality Studies. The title of the department broadens the scope of what is being investigated, but at the same time, it validates women's studies as its own discipline, and it validates ethnic studies as its own discipline. The new department's first fruits, as it were, are seen clearly today in the summit. The new department is a repositioning or realignment to better speak to a new generation of students, and we just heard a summary of them from Chineri just now, a new generation of students who are interested in women's studies and ethnic studies and gender more broadly, and the fascinating intersections that occur, the commonalities and the differences. The new department also is a move to realign the department to the current expertise we have in many departments. And I don't just mean within the college, I mean outside the college. Bonzella and Adil are real examples of that. Making it explicitly an interdisciplinary department, an inclusive department, and an exciting department. I want to thank the chair of the newly named department, Women's, Ethnic, and Intersectional Studies, Chineri Okafor, for her tireless efforts in advocating for her discipline and her imagination in bringing in other disciplines. And Chineri Okafor has both discipline expertise and she has imagination. And if you did not know it, she is a creative writer. I would also like to thank Robin Henry, who chaired the committee to realign the department, who represents yet another discipline, which was discussed earlier today, a discipline which is at the heart of all we do, or it should be at the heart of all we do, history. I would also like to thank the sponsors of the summit, including the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and the League of Women Voters of Wichita. And to them, I would like to say, they should know that our mission in the college, and I think in the university, is nothing less than to create responsible global citizens to actively preserve our democracy around the world. And I would like to thank President Muma, the Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer, Marche Fleming-Randall, and Shirley Lefevre, Interim Provost, for their personal interest and their support of the summit. And finally, I would like to thank our three magnificent speakers this evening, Susan Castro, Fonsella McCleary-Jones, and Adil Torres Rivera. Thank you all.
That was a good speech and a good conclusion of the Diverse Women Summit. Thank you, presenters. Thank you, sponsors. Thank you, Dean Hipsley, for closing it on this note. I want to thank the staff who has made this possible. Joyce, the poetry word, thank you. And I also want to thank my TA, Lila Kohler, and the committee that helped to put this together. Dr. Robin Henry and Dr. Debbie Garden and myself. So a shout to all those that helped. So I look forward to the next Diverse Women Summit, which will be coming up next year. Bye.